It's good, y'all. Welcome back to Niner Wire. I'm your host, Sam, and today we are here for episode 3 of Positional Preview going into next season. Obviously, the 49ers got a lot of needs. We're going to talk about two positions today, running back and wide receiver. Could conserve them needs. We might have a lot of action there during the offseason, so we're here to break it down for you. And for this stream, we got two guests. We got Jordan right here, and we got Rohit right here. How you doing, guys?
Doing all right. How about you?
Pretty good. How you doing, Jordan?
No, I'm doing good.
Pretty good. That's good to hear. But yeah, guys, we're going to be talking about running backs. We're going to be talking about our wide receivers, possible free agents, looking at our current free agents, looking at some draft guys for each of those positions. So should be a great stream, kind of like the old ones, but let's just get right into it. Before we do that, make sure to follow me on Twitter at NinerWireSam. My Instagram's at NinerWire_YT. If you're watching on Twitter, make sure to subscribe to Niner Wire on YouTube. I post a lot of stuff on all those platforms, so make sure to check those places out. Another platform you can check me out, Talking Niners Podcast with me and at Bay Kobe on Twitter, Kobe and Sam. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Talking Niners Pod. Also, guys, gotta make sure to follow these two guys right here. Rohit at RohitKanan71. Jordan is at Splash_cousin on Twitter. Go check those guys out. They post a lot of stuff there, interesting stuff. Make sure to follow them. And as always, any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the chat below. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So let's just start with the running backs and talk about what we need for the running back position, what types of players we need. So I guess I can start this off. And in my opinion, running back is probably one of our, I wouldn't say it's necessarily, I mean, you could say it's a big need. Well, not necessarily. Like, we still have some holes to fill, but running back's the easiest position for this team because, in my opinion, Shanahan can really work with whatever running back he wants. So, in my opinion, I think the only need for this team is just someone who can stay healthy. I know last year we had so many injuries to Mostert, Jeff Wilson, a lot of other guys. So, I think that's my biggest need for running backs. What you guys got for biggest running back need going into the season?
You want to go first, Roth? Or?
Yeah, sure. You can go first.
I think they really are set ultimately with Mostert and Wilson as guys who are probably going to get the majority of their snaps at the position. 2020 is kind of a weird year because there was obviously so many injuries, COVID, stuff like that was affecting the rhythm of the offense a bit, how much you'd normally see a player in a given season. If you go back to 2019, they had 3 guys who got over 100 carries. Tevin Coleman went over 100, Breda went over 100, and Mostert went over 100. I think that's kind of the template that Shanahan's looking for. He wants to spread the workload out over 2 to 3 backs. Maybe Mostert clearly kind of separated himself from the rest of the pack in the past year and a half or so. So he might be getting somewhere around 150, 175. But generally, you'd be looking at 3 guys to be getting over 100, in my opinion. Right now, clearly Wilson and Mostert would be the front runners. Austin Walter, they just re-signed. The reports that I've heard are that they are very high on him. The fact that they were willing to bring him back kind of signifies that. I think that they're very capable of making it work with those undrafted guys that they get in the system. They get in the running back room with Bobby Turner, and they end up turning these guys into they may not be superstars, but they're going to be capable backs who can produce within the system. So I don't really expect them to do very much in terms of free agency or the draft regarding the running back position. I think they're pretty set. Obviously, we know McKinnon's probably on the way out. It unfortunately didn't work out for, just due to injuries. It happens. It's unfortunately part of the game. Tevin Coleman, I'd be surprised to see him come back, although I personally wouldn't be against it. I think he did a very good job at being kind of a change of pace back. He may not have been a bruiser, but he definitely hit the hole a little bit harder than Mostert may have. I think Wilson can kind of fill that void, though, so maybe they feel more comfortable keeping Wilson and having him in that role. But where they're at currently, I think they're fine. To be honest, the only position in the backfield I'm really curious about is what they're going to do with Kyle Juszczyk. If they're going to pony up to pay him and shell out the money that it's going to cost to bring him back, because he's a fullback, but he's an offensive weapon too. He does so many things for them, and his ability to be so versatile does make him a little bit more valuable than a typical fullback. But at the end of the day, he still is a fullback. And with the team that has so many needs, I'd be really curious to see if they're willing to meet. I don't think he's going to get the $6 million that he was averaging a year on the deal he signed in 2017, but he still should command around 4.5, maybe 5. And I just don't know that the 49ers are in a position where they can justify that. And that's no disrespect to Kyle Juszczyk, and I'm not downplaying how significant of a role he plays. But ultimately, it's just from a positional value standpoint.
Not a value position.
It's really tough to, and especially if you look at the interior, if you discount Weston Richburg, who hasn't played in, year and a half almost now, and you can't really count on for the future. Kyle Juszczyk is making twice as much as the next closest interior offensive lineman. And for how many problems the 49ers have had on the interior offensive line, you can't really justify paying a fullback that much money while you're, not filling holes at, a position of need clearly at both guard positions and center.
Yeah, I agree with that. The real like backfield situation is how if we're going to keep Juszczyk, how much do we pay him, or do we let him go and just go with someone like Chase Harrell, or just move on Charlie Warner to like fullback or something?
Josh Hokett too is another good option
there.
But that's another undrafted free agent. But undrafted free agents are really the key for Kyle Shanahan. You look at Jeff Wilson, undrafted free agent. Raheem Mostert, undrafted free agent. Jerick McKinnon, undrafted free agent, if I'm correct. I'm not so sure about Tevin Coleman, but JaMychal Hasty, I am sure, undrafted free agent. I was so high on that guy last year. So, I mean, that's where I kind of say, like, Kyle Shanahan values the hell out of running back position. And, I mean, he doesn't value it that much. He can really work with whatever guy he wants. So, I mean, he could really just pick up one of us three if you're really asking that. Whatever he wants, he'll go with that at running back if he really wants. So, yeah, but as we talk about the current free agents, you got Tevin Coleman, you got Jerick McKinnon. I think both are out the door. I think especially after McKinnon's comments on the Niners, it definitely seems like there's no shot he's coming back. I know we kind of wanted to use him in that satellite back role, kind of that. It was started with the workhorse role, then it moved to the satellite role after injuries. The satellite role didn't really work out so much, so that kind of sucks for Jerick McKinnon. Tevin Coleman, on the other hand, I mean, yes, he had a down year, but as Jordan said, I mean, I wouldn't hate bringing him back. I don't think they are going to do it. I think there are better options out there they can do. You got JaMychal Hasty developing. Another year for JaMychal Hasty. That could be good for the 49ers. Could be good. And that kind of also means that Tevin Coleman could be on the way out if JaMychal Hasty takes a bigger role for this team. So, yeah.
Yeah, another name to watch out for is Austin Walter, because we just signed him to a future reserve contract just a few days ago when we signed
something like that. And he did pretty damn well for us when we had all the injuries. So, yeah, definitely good point. So,
I mean, it's like it's practically like a plug and play at this point in terms of running backs. It's whoever you want to put in, they'll manage to produce. So I don't think Shanahan's going to put that much value into or throw that much money at a free agent running back or use a higher draft pick on a running back. He's probably just going to go for like someone like the 5th round or later, or an undrafted free agent has been the case since the past few years.
For sure. And if he does go with the free agent, which I think having a free agent would help. This is a young backfield. Maybe bringing in some more veteran leadership would be good. I think bringing in a cheap free agent would be a great idea. And as Sanjo Sonny says right here, what do you guys think about bringing back Frank Gore? I mean, who wouldn't love bringing back Frank Gore? In my opinion, it's not realistic. I don't think Frank Gore is fitting what Kyle Shanahan wants. Yes, you want a veteran running back, but Frank Gore is he's old as hell, and I don't really think he's going to be able to contribute. I mean, he'll contribute a leadership aspect, absolutely. But I think there is some veteran leaders on this team that have that leadership aspect. I think Raheem Mostert provides that. Jeff Wilson is stepping into that leadership role, I feel like. So I don't think it's realistic. I think you're probably looking at some other cheap options out there. But before I get into that, I want to hear what you guys think about Frank Gore.
I mean, here's the thing. It's sentiment at this point. He's one of the 49 all-time greats. He's a future Hall of Famer, obviously. But at this point, it doesn't make sense to bring him back because like you said, it's not really – he doesn't fit what Shanahan wants to do. And if he doesn't fit what the head coach wants to do, what's really going to be the point of bringing something like that?
He might have froze there. I don't know. Jordan, you got any thoughts on that? On Frank Gore?
I love Frank Gore. Frank Gore's one of my favorite 49ers of all time. He's somebody that, normally if it was any other 37-year-old running back, I would honestly just laugh at the notion of bringing them back at all to a team that's contending. But Frank Gore has kind of defied logic and is sort of superhuman in a way. So I wouldn't completely discount it. I think the 49ers have incorporated a lot more things that Frank Gore does. There are a lot more counters, a lot more traps, a lot of stuff like that he could succeed doing. If he came in and he really wanted to be a guy who's going to get maybe 3 or 4 touches a game and take on more of a mentorship role, maybe they figure something out. I personally wouldn't do it. And that's, again, no disrespect to Frank Gore. He's one of the best running backs I've ever seen in my life and an all-time 49er. He's a franchise icon. Personally, if I was going to bring back an ex-49er, I would bring back Matt Breda, who's an unrestricted free agent. I think that Breda and the other running backs, they all kind of are something similar. The only real difference is that I think Breida and Mostert just have different breakaway speed. Those guys, when they get open in the second level, they're on a different plane than a Jeff Wilson or a Walter or a Michael Hasty. That's no disrespect again to any of those guys. It's just that's how quick Mostert and Breida are. So maybe there's mutual interest in bringing him back. But in regards to Gore, it's just I don't see a path unless Kyle truly feels that he can incorporate him into the offense and can make it work, where he's going to justify bringing back Gore at whatever the veteran minimums would be. And it's not that Gore would cost too much money and it would be, he's being selfish in any way. It's that literally for the veteran minimum, he'd be taking up the same amount of money nearly that you get 2 undrafted free agent contracts out of. And the 49ers in the past couple weeks, of the top 50 running backs in terms of average per year last season, in terms of running back contracts, the 49ers are the only team that's re-signed one of those running backs, and they've done it twice. They re-signed Wilson and they re-signed Walter. So it seems like they kind of have a plan for what they're going to do at running back. Again, I would have a hard time being upset about it because it is Frank Gore, but I just want no parts in a 37-year-old running back, truthfully. And the only reason I would even entertain it again is because Frank Gore has defied logic. Like, him and Tom Brady are like single-handedly taking on Father Time by themselves. Like, I've never seen Father Time lose, but Frank Gore and Tom Brady are putting up hell to fight right now.
Absolutely. And I definitely think, I like that point about Matt Breida, and that kind of segues into what free agents we should bring in for the 49ers. Matt Breida was one guy that definitely stood out to me. That's a guy that knows the system, did really well here. Yes, he had some fumbling trouble towards the end, but the fumbling trouble, a lot of people said that, oh, that's a major problem. He didn't fumble as much as people thought he did. Yes, he had that fumble in the Minnesota game. That was bad. But after a down year in Miami, it could be a good idea to bring him back to San Francisco where he could blossom, sign him for a very cheap contract. That would help us a lot. I know he's been hanging out with a lot of Niners guys this offseason. You see pictures with Kendrick Bourne. Jerick McKinnon probably not going to be here, but still a Niner, I guess. So, yes, he's been hanging out with some Niner guys. Other cheap options. And by the way, I know Dom says right here, Aaron Jones, yes, he's probably going to leave to Green Bay. We should sign him. But, I feel like he's going to be too expensive. There's a reason why he wants out of Green Bay. Well, there's 2 reasons. First of all, he's not going to get the full workhorse load. And second of all, he wants money, and the Packers are not going to do that when you have Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon in that backfield as well. So I don't think Aaron Jones is going to be the answer. I've seen rumors that the Niners are interested in him. I think that's just interest, maybe just like checking in about it, doing their due diligence, but I don't think it's anything that big. So, yeah. But other cheap options I think you're probably looking at, I found a few on just looking at a few. Both Eagles running backs are free agents. Corey Clement, Boston Scott, both had pretty good roles in Philadelphia. Those would be good fits for the team. And again, by the way, I'm just naming a few names that just stood out to me on that list. There's probably a guy on that list I didn't even recognize that Kyle Shanahan signs because he can work with any running back that he wants. Wayne Gallman, that could be a little bit of a more expensive sign, but I think he would be an RB1 in this system. He did really well in New York. I like what he did there. So I think he could be an RB1 in this system. Malcolm Brown, again, a guy who could be an RB1, maybe not. I don't know. He was kind of up and down throughout the year. A guy who would be a good RB2, Samaje Perine from the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a name that stood out to me. He's only 26, still has a little bit more development to do. Didn't have that much role in Cincinnati behind a terrible offensive line. Coming to San Francisco with a run blocking heavy offensive line might be a good fit. One guy that really stood out to me on that list, and I know Kyle Shanahan likes versatility. How about Ty Montgomery? He was, yes, he hasn't been that good in a few years, but he's played wide receiver before. He made the transition to running back. I wonder if Kyle Shanahan would bring him in to use him as a bit of both, be that versatile guy. I know Jalen Hurd, that we'll talk more about Jalen Hurd when we get to wide receivers and everything, but Ty Montgomery is a guy to watch out for. So those are just a few cheap options I named. Feel free to add onto that list, guys, or just talk about any of the guys I talked about there.
Wait, doesn't Ty Montgomery also have a bit of experience with special teams? Because special teams was a very bad part of the field, part of the football game for us last season. Kick returning was non-existent. Punt returning was a disaster. It was just bad. So if we can get someone like Ty Montgomery who has a bit of experience with the kick return, I mean, it's just added versatility, really. What's the worst that could happen? Honestly.
Okay.
I firmly believe in not paying running backs. I think running back is, and this is no disrespect to anybody who plays the position. It's, they're a vital part of what an offense does. But when you're building a team and you look at positional value, running backs are the most easily replaced and they have the shortest shelf life. So ultimately, when you're sinking major dollars into them, it's rarely worked out. And especially if we look back in recent years, the three that come to mind immediately are probably Alvin Kamara, which is probably the only one that's come close to working out, Todd Gurley and Ezekiel Elliott. And 2 out of those 3 have been horrific for the teams that signed them and have caused them serious constraints. And Christian McCaffrey's deal, it's one season. So far, he got hurt with the high ankle sprain. It never really went away for most of the year.
But injuries, you can't. That's exactly why you don't pay running backs that much, because they're one of the most injury-prone positions in football. So,
yeah. So I personally wouldn't really. There's not really any free agent that I'm looking at that I'm like, oh, I would love for the 49ers to have. I know a lot of people think he's. A lot of people laugh when Gurley talked about the 49ers bring him in. If it was for the right price, I would like Gurley and Frank Gore last year. If we're talking about Frank Gore too, they had the same amount of yards per carry. The only issue is that Gurley has that knee tendonitis. And you really don't know when it's going to flare up and cause issues, but he also does have a knack for finding the end zone and working in those short yardage situations. But again, if you remove the name and you remove the past production that's associated with him when he was one of the best backs in the league for a couple years there, I would much rather have a Jeff Wilson or someone like that who has shown a propensity to improve in their time here, and I think can do a lot more for a lot less or around the same price, while also not having the same issue, because Wilson had the ankle injury he suffered against New England, but it's a little different. That knee tendonitis is tough. The reports that we've been cheering for Gurley for the last 2 years is that it's literally almost bone on bone at this point. Like the cartilage is so damaged that that's tough to do for any human. Just like if you're walking to the grocery store or something, but when you're playing NFL football and you're that it's that physically demanding with your knee in that state. I was impressed he was able to play as much as he was in Atlanta this year, truthfully. So I think there's nobody really that stands out to me. The one thing that I do think the 49ers have been kind of lacking is a pass catching running back that really is a threat in the receiving game, which is why I think they paid Jerick McKinnon so much money when they brought him in. I think they kind of envisioned him in that role. The only free agent
back role, exactly.
Yeah, the only one that I'm really seeing that I would be interested in is James White, but I wouldn't want to pay him. I think it's something where you can find those guys in the draft. And I think Mostert has taken a huge step forward as a receiver. I think that in the past couple seasons, he's definitely shown that he's capable of being a guy who can run those choice routes out of the backfield and can turn a quick dump off into a net positive and make a lot out of little, if that makes sense in the passing game. He may not be going out and running routes out of the slot. He may not be getting a bunch of plays drawn up specifically for him. But we saw that choice route he ran week 1 against Arizona, and he took 75 yards, 80 yards. If you get him out in space, out of the backfield, I think he's more than capable of doing it. I think Wilson is more than capable of doing it as well. So in terms of running, I really think they're set at running back, truthfully. I don't mean to just keep rambling on, but I don't see anybody in the free agent market that I like every dollar counts when you're this much of a contender and you have guys to pay. Like Fred Warner's due for a big contract this year and he's earned every penny of it. So any dollars you can save here and there, even if it's that minimum of a little over $1 million, a couple $1 million here and there. Like Tevin Coleman, unfortunately, didn't have the season that he was probably hoping for this past season. And when they brought him in, I thought the deal looked okay because they had enough space at the time going into 2019. But that $4 million a year for a guy who's not an every down back really does add up over time, and it constrains what you can do around the rest of the roster. So I'm just at the point now where I think they have 4 running backs under contract right now. I think maybe they'll add another if they like somebody in the draft that ends up falling. They can get an undrafted contract, stash on the practice squad. Again, maybe Breda comes back. I think that's one to definitely keep an eye on. I think that there is definitely some mutual interest there. And other than that, I think they're pretty much set. Like I said, the biggest concern for me is fullback. If we're counting fullbacks as running backs, that's the one to watch. And there's a couple of guys that I like. I know they have Hockett. I don't know how to pronounce the name. The guy from on the practice squad. Another guy I really like is Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame. He's listed as a tight end, but he played a lot of fullback, and he did a lot of the same things that Juszczyk did, where he was lining up in the slot, He was blocking from the fullback position. He was running routes as a tight end. He provides a lot of versatility, but he also, in a lot of mocks I'm seeing, he's going in the late third, early fourth, and I don't know if the 49ers would be willing to use one of those compensatory picks that they have, which will be in that 96 to 100 range, on a guy like Tremble. But there is an option to replace him. Like when I looked at him, I was like, maybe they do take him and they've replaced, Juice on a guy on a really cheap deal. But that's the main one to really watch out for, in my opinion, because he is very integral to what they do in the run game. But it's very hard to justify paying a fullback the amount of money that they paid him. They could justify it in 2017 when they had a boatload of cap space and they weren't a very ideal destination for guys to want to come and take a pay cut because they were just truthfully not very good at the time. But now as a contending team that's going to need to soak up every dollar they can, I have a really hard time seeing them paying Juszczyk the same amount of money that they paid him before.
Yeah, for sure. Fullback does not get talked enough about. We do not talk enough about fullback, just as Niners fans in general, I feel like. And I'll be honest, I am definitely guilty of that. Like, I'll be completely honest, I didn't even mention the fullback in my notes. But if you want to talk about fullback, Kyle Juszczyk, I definitely think you're right about that, Jordan. Fullback is definitely more important than running back for this team. Kyle Juszczyk is an X factor for this team. These running backs that we have are not X factors for this team. So the importance of Kyle Juszczyk is definitely very important. I definitely think that the Notre Dame guy, I've looked at him a little bit, not too much. I need to look at tight ends and running backs a bit more in the draft, but he is definitely one of the guys that I've looked at, I've heard about. I've heard good things about him. I think that would be a good fit. There's also, like I said last year, I mean, Josh Hokett was an undrafted guy. There's probably another late round guy, and it's probably a guy who plays tight end. Everyone has him listed as a tight end, but the 49ers are going to use him at fullback. That's probably how it's going to be this year with the 49ers. They're going to find a tight end who does that. Free agents, I don't think there's really not that many free agents right there. So, yeah. As for tagging Kyle Juszczyk, I mean, I wouldn't be. What do you guys think about that? I would not. I mean,
he gets tagged as a running back. There's no franchise tag for a fullback, so the franchise tag would be over $11 million on a 1-year deal for Juszczyk. That's
there's no way that would be even considerably even worth it. No.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I don't blame him. Yeah, if he didn't know, because I didn't know until I looked into it that they just lump fullback in with running back, and that that franchise tag again would be north of $11 million. It's total. If it was a $3.5-4 million deal, yeah, totally. Like I would look into that for sure. But at $11 million, there's no way you can pay a guy $11 million to be a fullback.
Yeah, for sure. I think tagging Juszczyk, if that's the case, which I didn't know about that, I'm just going to trust you guys on that one. No way in hell am I doing that. You definitely got to sign him to a deal. And I mean, I don't know how expensive that deal is going to be, how much he's asking for. It definitely seems like, in that press conference that he had, end of season press conference, he was getting emotional about coming back to the Niners. So does he want to come back? Seems like he absolutely does. Does he want the money? Seems like he also wants that. So we'll have to see what happens with Kyle Juszczyk, but I definitely think that is something you have to watch out for. The other good thing with Kyle Juszczyk, I mean, even though he is such a critical part to this team, not that many other teams use a fullback, and I don't think there's any team in the NFL that uses a fullback as much as we do. So I definitely think if you want a landing spot for Kyle Juszczyk, it's the San Francisco 49ers. So, I mean, it is the best fit for him for sure because we utilize fullback so much. So I definitely think that's a positive to the fullback position. So, yeah, I think in free agency, the only guy that really stood out for a fullback is Devontae Booker of the Raiders. And he's not a Kyle Juszczyk, so we'll have to see right there. Nick Bosa says that Jets might overpay. I definitely think it's definitely an option, but I mean, yes, you brought a lot of 49ers guys in, but I mean, you brought in Robert Saleh, a defensive guy, as your head coach. I think you're probably looking at a similar but a bit different of an offensive scheme for the New York Jets. And Mike LaFleur was the pass game coordinator here, even though they used Juszczyk a lot in the pass game here as well. And we'll have to see what happens, but I don't know if the Jets' goal is to just be the San Francisco 49ers 2.0, but that is definitely another option. Jets might overpay. They haven't used the fullback in the past, but with new coaching and everything, there's a lot. So, yeah. You guys got anything else you want to talk about fullback?
Not about fullback, no, but one name that actually stood out to me for running back, which I found interesting, but I'm still a bit worried about because of the injury that he recently suffered, is Marlon Mack. I mean, yeah, he just suffered an Achilles injury. We still don't know how well that's healing or has healed, but I mean, if he's healthy, I wouldn't mind bringing him in on like a quick 1 year prove it deal and just as like insurance really.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be a great deal right there. Marlon Mack. I mean, it's my hard thing with that is the Achilles injury for a running back is never good. I mean, yes, he tore it week 1, which is better than tearing it week 17, but still, it's never that good of a sign to just have that Achilles injury right there on that guy. So yeah, I don't really think Marlon Mack's the best option, but if you want a really cheap option, I think he would be good. It's a low risk, high reward option. And last time we did a low risk, high reward option, that was Jordan Reed. And he did pretty damn well for us towards the beginning half of the season until he got some few injuries. But yeah, I definitely think Marlon Mack would be a good fit for the 49ers. So
I mean, if it's a right price, I'm genuinely not opposed to bringing him on a 1 year prove it deal. But if he's asking for a higher price, or he's asking for like 2 or 3 years now. For
sure. Another guy, David Yang, says Lesean McCoy. I mean, my thing about that, I mean, he's kind of washed, in my opinion. He hasn't really been good for the past few years. I mean, I don't really remember. I mean, yes, he was on the Bucs, but if ask me in 5 years, I'm going to forget that Lesean McCoy is on that team. I'm never going to remember Lesean McCoy as a Buck, as a Chief, as he was on some other team before the Chiefs, and he was Buffalo, but it went from Buffalo to Kansas City. I'll remember him in Buffalo, but. Yeah, man, I don't think Lesean McCoy is the best option. If you want a guy, like a veteran guy, why not just bring in Frank Gore? So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Jordan, you got anything else on fullback on any other guys for free agency before we move into draft guys for running back?
No, not really. The only thing the 49ers might need to worry about is that there's a lot of guys that are running Shanahan's scheme or something very similar now due to that coaching tree having so much success between himself and McVay. So you might have a team that does value Juszczyk a little bit more. Maybe Saleh and LaFleur in New York really want to bring him in because he's a high character guy who could help. There it is right there. Somebody already has a step ahead of me there. They might do it. Atlanta really is in a tough position cap-wise, so I don't think Arthur Smith could afford to do it. Same thing with the Rams. I don't think they can. The Packers are in a tough position, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they did take a swing at him and tried to lure him to.
I thought they wanted to use DeGuara. I mean, they have Josiah DeGuara, which they used on third rounder on. I thought they wanted to use him as the fullback. I mean, he did have an injury this year, so Juszczyk might be a good option there. So we'll have to see.
Sometimes you take the proven commodity over, and I could talk for an hour about how stupid it was to spend a third round pick on an H-back, but that's always a discussion for another day. But there's plenty. There's almost a third of the league now is running the same or something similar to what Kyle's running. And a lot of teams, Mark Schlereth was on, I forget what show he was on, but he said every team he spoke to was trying their best to try to mimic Kyle's run scheme and try to figure out what the hell is going on with him and how they can duplicate that success within their own schemes, even if they're not running the same stuff. So having a guy like Juszczyk does give them kind of the ultimate chess piece when you are running that run scheme that Kyle's employing. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see somebody else drive up the price and ultimately somebody who has more money end up taking him. I think that he wants to be here, but at the same time, this is probably his last chance to get a relatively big deal. It's weird to say for a fullback that they're in line to get another big contract, but he's not really a fullback. He's an offensive weapon. Like, I don't like putting him in a box as a fullback because he does do more than that. But at the same time, if you're going purely based off of production, which is the best way to I don't say the best, but it's the only quantifiable way to measure somebody's value without getting into subjectivity where you can say him being on the field throws off a defense or it makes them bring in base personnel and this and that. If you're going purely based off of just production, he hasn't really justified the cap hit. But if you take into account everything that he brings to the table, I think he definitely does. So it all depends on the lens you're looking at it through. Like, I love statistics, but at the same time, they don't always tell the full story, because if you look at just the statistics, you think it was a massive overpay. But again, it leaves out the fact that when he's on the field, generally teams have to come out in a base defense. His ability to catch the ball, to line up in the slot, to line up at tight end, and do all these things that he does gives a lot more value than you might see on the surface if you were looking and you weren't, like, if somebody was a fan of a different team that didn't watch very many 49ers games, they just looked at box scores, they'd be like, why the hell is this guy making $6 million a year?
Exactly.
But as people who watch the team, we can kind of understand why. I just don't see them being in a position now where they can justify that kind of cap hit for him.
For sure. And I know, Rohit, you said Charlie Warren might be a good fullback for us. Ross Dwelly, I mean, that's a name
that we should watch.
Exactly, especially later in the season. He had a big role in the blocking game. Did pretty damn well at it too. That was a guy who was making a noticeable impact in the blocking game for especially when Kittle was out and we really needed that tight end to step up. He stepped up in a big way. So I definitely think Ross Dwelley is another name you could look at. Give him more opportunities in that game. And by the way, he is yes, he doesn't get that many passes, but he does not drop the ball much at all. So if you really want another fullback, and I believe we did use him in that fullback role a little bit earlier in the backfield sometimes. So Ross Dwelley is another name to watch out for. I would not be surprised if they do that. That would just open another hole at tight end. Not necessarily, because you got Charlie Warner right there. So, either way, I think you're pretty good. If Ross Dwelley is your fullback, that's a name we haven't talked about much today. I definitely think that's another name to look out for. So, yeah. All right, let's move on to some guys that we should look in the draft. And I'm going to be honest, there's not that many guys that are going to stand out to me right away because all these guys if we're going to take someone in the draft, it's going to be either round 6, round 7, or an undrafted free agent. And one of those guys, and whoever that guy is, nobody's talking about right now. I will say, let's talk about one guy who is being talked about a little bit. That is Demetric Felton, the running back out of UCLA. Kind of goes back to versatility. He played wide receiver at the Senior Bowl. A lot of teams are scouting him as a wide receiver. You could see that Jalen Hurd replacement kind of. Well, Jalen Hurd replacement is a guy who's going to be like big as well. So, yeah, as Eric Sully says right here, that is a guy I believe that Kyle Shanahan is going to fall in love with. I would not be surprised. I've seen the problem with him is value. I've seen some teams take him to the 3rd round. I know, Jordan, you would be pissed about that, just taking a guy like a running back in the 3rd round. But I definitely think he is an option for this team. I personally wouldn't be mad if we take him in the 3rd round, but hopefully we can get him in the later round. You're probably looking at round 4, round 5. I know Matt Miller had him in round 6 on his mock draft, which is pretty low for him. But I definitely think Demetric Felton, after what we've seen Kyle Shanahan look for in guys, that is definitely a Kyle Shanahan guy who has Kyle Shanahan written all over him. I definitely think that's the one guy in the draft to keep a big eye on for, maybe possibly a future Niner. In my opinion, that Niners would be his best fit, in my opinion. So I definitely think that's a great guy to watch for the Niners in the draft. You guys got any guys that you want to talk about?
Not a running back now.
No. Demetric Felton, he's an interesting name because he can do a lot more than just be a running back. He's somebody I've talked to at length with Jake Schultz on Twitter. I think that's his @ too. I have to double check. But Jake, that's Jake's guy. I would like to give him credit because he's been on Felton for quite a while. He definitely is somebody that I think would fit that mold where Kyle Shanahan's in this kind of state where he's not. I don't think he's not drafting guys for their position, but he's drafting guys to be positionless in a way. And what I like to compare it to is it's kind of like how the Warriors were 6-7 years ago in the NBA, where they kind of eliminated the traditional big man and they eliminated traditional roles, and they just sort of played positionless basketball. That's kind of the way the the Niners are at now, in my opinion, where they have these guys who can line up like a use check, where they're lining up in the backfield in the slot. You have a guy like an Ayuk who can come in a shotgun formation, line up next to the quarterback, motion out wide, run these jet sweeps, run these end arounds, and run all these things that generally a traditional wide receiver might not be doing or a traditional running back might not be doing. So he definitely gives them the versatility. I like him. I'm of the mindset, like if you're taking a guy and you're really bullish on a running back, round 3 is the earliest I would do it. And even then, I don't feel great about it. But if it ends up panning out, like Alvin Kamara, I can't sit here and say Alvin Kamara was a bad pick. However, his second deal that he's getting now, he did very good this year. Going into next year and the year after, if he's not living up to the price tag he's making, it looks really bad. But that first 4 years of production they got, that was a home run for the Saints. So if you're getting a guy like that in the 3rd round, I have no issue with it. Again, and it all comes back to just the fact that these guys are so easily replaceable, which is why I think spending a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, getting them undrafted ends up working out way better, because if they don't work out, you can end up cutting them. Matt Breda was an undrafted free agent. They got 3 years of production out of, and then they traded him for a 5th round pick. Like, they ultimately netted a pick that was a 5th rounder when they never even spent a pick on him in the first place, and they got 3 years of production out of him. So something like that, it may not seem big, And again, McKivitz didn't really look great in the time he was there because that's what the pick ultimately turned into. But the 49ers got a chance at a guy that at the very least is going to be a depth signing for them at an important position for somebody that they never even had to spend capital on in the first place. So if they can keep using that strategy of kind of getting a couple years of production, flipping a guy for a late round pick, I think they're going to be much better off doing that. And I do think that there are some guys that they can get later on in the draft that would be good fits that they, again, I don't see them doing it, first of all, because I think the running back room is set. But if it was, I like Killen Hill out of Mississippi State.
That's another guy I was going to talk about. Yeah. I like him a lot.
He's very, very explosive. He's improved a lot as a pass blocker. I think that he is definitely somebody that provides the upside of maybe being close to it. I don't think there's really an every down back in Kyle's system, but somebody that's close to that. Maybe in a year or so, if they do move off of a Mostert, or if they do, decide not to bring back Wilson, if he ends up earning playing so well that he plays himself out of the cheap contract that they have him on now. Another guy that I really like is Jamar Jefferson out of Oregon State. I think he would be a tremendous fit for what Kyle likes to do. I think he would do fantastic on those outside zone runs. He's somebody that I could see getting in the 6th, 7th round. Maybe he even gets undrafted. Maybe he even ends up not being drafted. Hard to really tell at this point. The only running back that I would really spend significant capital on in this draft, and again, this is like a third at the earliest, is Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. I think he's the most complete back in this class. I think that he got kind of, swept under the rug a bit with, all the attention going to Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. But I think he's phenomenal. And I think Michael Carter out of North Carolina, ironically enough, they had 2 very good backs. Both these guys graded in the top 10 for rushing grade and receiving grade this past season. And I think that they both, Williams might be a little bit more of a complete back, but Carter is somebody that I could definitely see. I was talking earlier about how they might need that receiving threat. I think he would give that to them in spades. The guys that I work with at 49 GM that were at the Senior Bowl, they were raving about him at Senior Bowl practices. They said that he looked very explosive. He was very good in space. He was making guys miss. So Michael Carter is a guy I would definitely watch for, but I just don't see them spending a pick on a running back when they can get a guy like, if you think about it last year, they had Hasty, who everybody ended up, falling in love with during the season. And, he had his moments where he looked explosive. But they also had Salvon Ahmed, who ended up going to Miami and averaged over 4 yards a carry and looked really good for them. And the Niners had so much depth at running back that they couldn't keep a guy who ended up being very productive. If you're averaging over 4 yards a carry and you're on that cheap of a contract, that to me is a very good
value all over him.
They've shown a propensity, drafting is hard. Talent evaluation is hard. The 49ers are far from perfect. Nobody's perfect. But the 49ers have done a very, very good job with those running backs in the late round, which makes me think that they wouldn't spend that high of a pick. If I recall correctly, the highest pick that they've spent on a running back was Joe Williams.
I'm pretty sure. And that was
back in 17.
I'm pretty sure that was like a 4th comp pick too.
So that's kind of, and if you count Hurd as a running back, I don't, because he ended up playing receiver ultimately when they drafted him. He was a 3rd, but I think they've shown that you don't really need, there's a good strategy to be had in drafting guys in the trenches and drafting defensive linemen, offensive linemen, getting those guys in the trenches early and then developing athletes later in the draft and turning them into skill position players. So I could definitely see them going that route. I just don't see a path where the 49ers look at a running back and they really fall in love with a guy where they have to spend a high pick on them, because they really have guys in place who've proven that they can produce at an elite level. Mostert's biggest issue is durability, which is why I think having combination of him and Jeff Wilson taking the lion's share of the carries will ultimately work out very well for them. It's not like if they were in a position where they didn't really have depth on the roster and they really needed a running back threat to come in and kickstart the offense, I could totally see it. I just don't see the 49ers being remotely close to a position where they're desperate for a running back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the UNC running backs. I know that's might not be realistic, but both guys were averaging 8 yards a carry at North Carolina. If that doesn't scream Kyle Shanahan at you, I don't know what does. I doubt they take him. I think you're probably. I would say the best fit's Felton, but those are 2 guys to watch out for. I doubt that happens, but yeah, another guy. As someone pulled up right here, Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. I like him a lot. But again, kind of a round 4 guy, probably. I don't know where he's really falling. I haven't got too much of a look at him, but he's got a lot of speed from what I've heard, so I'll have to take a look at him. Might as well bring this up. It's not happening, but I think the best fit would be Travis Etienne, but that's no way that's happening. We're not wasting a 1st or a 2nd on him. But I mean, if we did that, that would just be fun to watch. But there's not really any need to talk about that. So yeah, for sure. Oh, Trey Sermon, that's the other guy. Sleeper in this draft, in my opinion. Trey Sermon out of Ohio State could be another guy to watch. I want to watch a bit more film on him too, so I'll make sure to bring that to you guys when that comes out. But yeah, you guys got anything else on running back before we move on to wide receiver?
No.
All right, perfect. So got through running back. Let's move on to the next position, wide receiver. So this offseason, I think, in my opinion, what you're looking for in a wide receiver is, I think there's two things you really need. First of all is I think you need a Jalen Hurd emergency plan. And it's not that big of a deal, but I think Kyle Shanahan drafted Jalen Hurd with that third-round pick, obviously for a reason. He wants that versatility in his wide receivers. He's got it with Deebo Samuel. He's got it with Brandon Ayuk. He wants it with Jalen Hurd, and he wants to do something special with Jalen Hurd. I can tell you that right now. Just from what I've heard with that, he wants to do something special with Jalen Hurd. So an emergency plan for him would be good. That's why I mentioned Demetric Felton up there, possibly a good Hurd replacement or emergency plan, I should say. Not really a full-on replacement, but yeah. Another thing that could work out for us is veteran leadership. I think that could be very key for this team. And then it's speed. I think if we're going to get a new quarterback, I think you can get a bit more speed on this wide receiver core with a deeper arm, go deeper. Kyle Shanahan wants to run a lot more plays if he gets a new quarterback. So I definitely think those are three things to watch. And kind of speaking on that new quarterback, I definitely think it depends on who this quarterback is for this team, because that's really going to determine how the offense goes. And I know a lot of people say like, oh, the 49ers can really just plug and play any quarterback there, which is somewhat true. But at the same time, like, the supporting cast has got to fit that quarterback's needs. So I definitely think you're going to have to see what the quarterback does, who they go for, and maybe free agent signings will tell you that. But that's what I'm thinking right now for biggest wide receiver needs this offseason.
I'd also add help to that because we also had a pretty bad rash of injuries there. Well, we can say that for any position really, because our entire team practically was injured this past season.
Exactly. Yeah. Joan, you got anything for needs for wide receivers? Any like fits needs or anything like that?
Yeah, they need a slot receiver that can play a traditional slot role. I think the fact, Deebo lined up a bunch in the slot. Ayuk lined up a bunch in the slot. Bourne was able to come in, especially on third downs, and line up in the slot. But I think they need a guy who is more of that traditional mold, or that can kind of be like their defined role almost. There's a couple guys in the draft I like who could do that for them. Elijah Moore is probably the top on that list for somebody that they look at as kind of a pure slot receiver. Again, it doesn't mean that they have to only line up in the slot, but somebody where they're going to excel specifically out of that position. He was great for Ole Miss this past year. Mm-hmm. I really like Daz Newsome out of North Carolina. I think he would be tremendous. I think he would give them tremendous versatility with a lot of the pre-snap motioning that Kyle likes to do too. My biggest draft crush probably in the entire draft, there's a lot of guys I really like, is probably Rondale Moore out of Purdue. Rondale Moore would give them an explosive home run threat that does a lot of the same things that Deebo can do in that short area, and has just a burst that's on just an insanely different level. I tweeted out last night, the guy's 5'9" and 180 pounds, but he runs a 4.3 40. He squats 600 pounds, and he has a 42-inch vertical. Like, the guy's a freak athlete. His biggest issue is just sort of durability. But in my opinion, between him and Deebo, if one goes down, the other is is extreme luxury in terms of an insurance policy, because they both can do so many of those things. And realistically, it's nice to have variety on offense, but at the same time, if you told me that I could have two Deebo Samuels on the field at the same time, I would take that in a heartbeat because of how dynamic of a player he is. And I think the ability to have somebody like Moore that could line up inside, outside, you could move Ayuk in the slot, you could pre-snap motion any of the three of them. It would give them tremendous flexibility, because a lot of what Kyle likes to do is sort of trick a defense by showing them a look that they can run. They can run a bunch of different things out of. Like, it's hard for defenses to really predict what the 49ers are throwing at them on a given snap, because Kyle has been doing such a good job as a play caller when he's been in the NFL at running things out of the same formations and the same looks that defenses really don't know what's coming. So if you have a guy like a Rondale Moore, a Daz Newsome, or somebody like that, it kind of gives you a little bit of leeway to continue to run that pre-snap motion and a lot of the things that we've seen them do the last couple of years. Another guy that I do really like is Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State. I wouldn't say he would be just a slot receiver, but he's definitely somebody that probably could fill that role. I think Sage Surratt out of Wake Forest could definitely be that Jalen Hurd insurance that Rohit was talking about, that could give them that big target. You know, he's not the fastest guy, but he's 6'3". I know he's over 200 pounds. He's 6'3". He's a big guy. He could definitely fill that void of that big target that they really are lacking, because that is one thing. Brandon Ayuk has an insane wingspan. His wingspan is over 80 inches.
83, I think it was. It was ridiculous.
He's listed at like 5'11", I think. So he has an insane catch radius, but the 49ers don't really have like this big-bodied player that can go up in the short area. George Kittle would probably be the closest to that, but at the same time, there's a reason why he hasn't had that success in the red zone, and a lot of it has to do with the attention that he commands from a defense when the field shrinks like that, and defenses tend to bracket him and try to take him away. So if they do get a guy like that, that's my thing. Get a slot guy. I would be totally cool with Elijah Moore. I would love Rondale Moore as much as I don't see them really, if they didn't have Deebo Samuel on the roster already, I could see them making that pick. But if they get a guy like a Sage Surratt that can come in, that can win jump balls, that you can throw 50-50 balls to, and they have a higher chance of bringing it down than maybe somebody who's on the roster now, I would be totally cool with it. I do think that they ultimately will bring Kendrick Bourne back too. Whether that's a depth role, I think preferably it would be as a 4th, 5th option who can come in certain packages, because he has shown a propensity to step up in big moments. I know people make a lot about, they make a big deal about his drops. He only had 4 drops last season, to be honest. And again, this is not to bring down George Kittle. George Kittle had twice as many at 8. Great play. He's an all-pro talent. Like, players drop passes in the NFL. It happens. Bournes, I think, just get magnified for some reason. I think they tend to have.
It's because he's Kendrick Bourne and George Kittle is George Kittle. It's that simple.
Yeah,
and Kendrick Bourne's drops come in bunches. I mean, if we look at 2019, I think he only had like 4 drops in all of 2019, but like 3 of them came in one game, and that's what they really focused on. But it's so it's not really like it's kind of just like a one game thing where like somehow his mind just goes blank and it's just like, wait, I was supposed to catch that. But in reality, he has one of the safest hands, if not the safest hands on the team.
Yeah, and he makes big catches. Like, I remember that catch he made in the Vikings game, to me, was one of the most impressive catches I've ever seen. When Jimmy got hit, I think as he was throwing the ball, it was a duck of a ball that went up in the air, and it did not. I thought it was going to get picked for sure, and somehow Bourne came up with it. He had a touchdown in that game. It kind of gets forgotten because the rest of the game was ended so tragically. But in the Super Bowl, he had a pretty good game, and he was there in some key spots. That game against the Saints, he had 2 touchdowns. He went up against Lattimore and posted up Lattimore in the end zone, who's one of the better corners in the league, and scored. Like, I think Kendrick Bourne gets a lot of unwarranted hate. I personally wouldn't want him as a guy that's commanding slot receiver, 3rd wide receiver snaps. But I definitely think that he could have a path to being a strong contributor still on the team. I just would rather get somebody with a little bit more upside at that 3rd wide receiver spot. And again, it's all relative to where, not everybody's going to live up to where they're drafted, and you shouldn't only compare players based on where they're drafted. But Kendrick Bourne was an undrafted free agent. If you look at the production of most undrafted free agents, the 49ers got tremendous value out of Kendrick Bourne to this point. If he never plays another snap for the 49ers, which I'm not saying I hope, I'm just saying, if that were to happen, they ultimately came out on top getting the amount of value they did from a player that they never spent any draft capital on to acquire.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at his numbers from season to season, they've only gone up. He had maybe like 300 yards his rookie year in 2017. Then he had around 350, 400 in 2018. His yardage went down again in 2019, but his touchdowns went up. And then this year he had 667 yards. I mean, he's only really been consistently improving. And I mean, and he also hasn't missed games due to injury, so he can stay healthy. Like, that's also pretty important as well.
Yeah, I mean, he missed games because of COVID last year, but I don't think COVID might impact 2021 season, but not as much as it impacted this season. Like, all the players should be vaccinated by then. It's not going to be as big as a deal in 2021. So I definitely think Kendrick Bourne, in my opinion, I think cheap deal is probably what you're looking for Kendrick Bourne. In my opinion, even though he's a valuable receiver for this team, he's easily replaceable. I think there's a lot of guys who can replace him, but I want to stick to the draft real quick before we talk about anything else, because I know Jordan was talking a lot about that. Elijah Moore, I think, is probably my number 1 guy for the 49ers. Slot receiver, runs a lot of jet sweeps while watching the film. And by the way, I've not watched much film of Elijah Moore, and I just saw that from like a few games. I think Elijah Moore would be a fantastic fit for this team. The only thing with Elijah Moore and wide receivers is the rankings are all over the place for wide receivers. Like, today I had a mock that 24 of the Jets. I've also seen people mock him higher than that. I've seen people mock him around 4. The value is all over the place for all these wide receivers. So Elijah Moore is probably my guy. Tylan Wallace is similar. Is kind of similar to, I would say more similar to Rondale Moore than Elijah Moore. And I'll talk about Rondale Moore in a sec. But that's another guy who's probably going to be a bit lower than Rondale Moore. And I know, Jordan, you praise Rondale Moore every time. And, I mean, you said it perfectly right there. And Rondale Moore is just a freak athlete. Durability is really his only concern. The other concern for the Niners, I have him getting taken the first round. I have a first-round grade on him, so I doubt we get him. We probably have to trade up. So, yeah, Daz Newsome, another guy I like. But let's talk about my guy that I just love this draft. This is my favorite receiver, Tamorrion Terry, the wide receiver out of Florida State. He's 6'4". He's fast. He can be a Jalen Hurd replacement. For some reason, he's getting mocked very late. I don't see that at all. I'm definitely missing something when watching film for him. I don't know what it is, but I love Tamorrion Terry. I think that would be a fantastic fit for the Niners. And Jordan, you said it. The Niners really need that big guy who can help be that red zone target. Tamorrion Terry is that guy. And I definitely think the one other thing with Tamorrion Terry, the one biggest weak side for him, in my opinion, is that he did run his route running was primarily verticals. So I definitely think that would have to change in the Niners offense. He definitely have to do some other things, but I love Tamorrion Terry. If he was a Niner, I would be so happy if that happened. Three other guys I want to mention real quick for the draft. Marquez Stevenson, another sleeper pick out of Houston. I like him a lot. It seems like he would fit this team pretty well. Shi Smith, I'm really only putting there because of the USC connection, South Carolina connection, but I mean, from what I've heard about him, I haven't watched much film on him, but he seems like a pretty good guy, round 3, round 4 for the Niners to get. And then Tutu Atwell, the value is all over the place for him. I've seen him mocked round 6. I've seen him mocked round 2. The value is all over the place for Tutu Atwell. And in my opinion, personally, I don't really like him as a receiver, but his main thing is route running. He is a fantastic route runner, and I would not mind Kyle Shanahan bringing him in to be that slot receiver. He's 5'7", pretty small, so he would be a great slot receiver for this team. So I think Tutu Atwell, if you really want a guy who can run more routes, he's got to work on the hands, he's got to work on the physicality, but he might be a good guy right there. So yeah, for sure. As Bean says right here, 6'4", 209, runs a sub 4.4 40. Absolute.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Tamorrion Terry. If you have not heard about Tamorrion Terry, click off this video, go watch the film. I love that kid a lot.
I mean, I've seen some Florida State games, and I mean, he jumps out to me, but I was not expecting sub 4.4.
Yeah, that's
insane.
He's ridiculous, dude. It's absolutely ridiculous. As Eric says right here, Amari Rogers from Clemson. He's a good guy. Here, my problem with Amari Rogers is, like, in that Clemson offense, he never, like, when he had all that competition, like with Justin Ross, T. Higgins, never really stood out to me too much. He's probably a round 3 guy, and I feel like he's kind of just like, I feel like he's just like a Kadarius Toney, but like worse. That's what I'm feeling like. The best fit for the Niners, in my opinion, is Kadarius Toney. That's it. If you want a Debo 2.0, that's your guy. However, I don't think we're gonna get him because I've seen him, like, I keep seeing him mocked to Washington at 19 on every mock draft now for the past week after the Senior Bowl. So I definitely think Kadarius.
He showed out in the Senior Bowl. That really moved his stock up.
Absolutely balled out. 49 GM guys, as Jordan said, will tell you a lot about that. They post a lot of clips there, so make sure to check them out. But yeah, Kadarius Toney is definitely a guy out there that I really like. So yeah, I doubt we get him though. So yeah, Roth, you got anything for the draft?
No, not the draft. I mean, Kadarius Toney's my guy, but again, because of the Senior Bowl and how much he balled out, I mean, I was hoping that he could somehow fall into the second round. We could have taken him there, but that Senior Bowl was insane.
For sure, definitely. Jordan, you got any other draft guys you want to talk about?
I mean, I could talk for hours about guys. We're just sticking to offense and wide receiver or what?
We're just talking about wide receiver. That's what I was thinking. Because I know you're a big wide receiver guy, so I know you got a lot to talk about.
Kadarius Toney is nice. He's a lot, anybody who remembers Dante Hall and the Chiefs back in the day, he's got a lot of comps, just slightly bigger Dante Hall. He's very shifty. His release package is very impressive, but he's a guy, again, I see going early. I really like Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. He reminds me a lot of Keenan Allen. Very crisp route runner, very technically sound. I really like Jalen Waddle out of Alabama. I know Rohit's probably a bigger fan than I am. I see him going very early, though, too.
Yeah, Jalen Waddle, I don't see him dropping to like 12. he's
marked
probably going
I
higher.
marked him at 3 today, so he's definitely going really high. 3 is probably a bit of a reach too, but he's going damn high. So yeah.
Yeah, like the big three guys, Smitty, Dwaddle, Jamar Chase at LSU. I mean, those guys, probably all three of them are going top 10. Do I think they should go top 10? No. I feel like if you're taking a wide receiver top 10, you're reaching hard. But they're that talented. They're gonna be going that high. But I mean, if somehow one of them falls to us, I mean, I don't know what the 49ers are planning with their first rounder. Are they going to package it to trade for somebody, or are they going to trade up to try and trade for a quarterback? We don't know what they're going to do. But if somehow one of those big three falls to us, I genuinely would not be opposed.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed at all. I definitely think wide receiver, how I would rank the needs for this team, I would go quarterback 1, cornerback 2, offensive line 3, edge 4, wide receiver 5. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't think it's happening round 1. I think that's why I keep bringing up guys like Tamorion Terry, Daz Newsome, Marquez Stevenson, Shi Smith. Those are 4 guys I would bring up. Sage Sherrod as well. I know Jordan talked about him. I forgot to bring him up as well. That's another guy you could get a bit of a later round pick. Elijah Moore, depending on how he falls. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking later round for the receivers. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this draft pans out for where the receivers go. Because, I mean, let's be real. This is, in my opinion, this is the most stacked receiver class. I know I haven't been alive for as long as some of the other viewers that are watching, but in my lifetime, this has to be the most stacked receiver class I've seen. Like, more stacked than last year. And I know last year was getting so much praise, but this year is by far better, in my opinion. So, yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to free agencies, unless you guys got anything else. But free agents. I definitely think looking at the free agents, there's definitely a lot of good fits for this team. Just to name a few, I definitely think you're probably looking at looked at a veteran guy who can play cheap and maybe slot receivers as well. So just to name a few guys, I didn't name that much. Let's start with this guy right here. As Jaron Alston said, John Ross, if he's a free agent, he might be a good fit here. He's fast, young, did not do well in Cincinnati. It's another low-risk, high-reward signing. Could do.
Yeah, didn't he also have a bit of an injury history there as well?
Yeah, he has a bit of an injury history. That's the other problem with him. So it's, again, a low-risk, high-reward signing. Justin Ross, John Ross, not Justin Ross. John Ross. I mean, you got a lot of speed with him. Niners, in my opinion, definitely need a bit of speed. So, yeah, for sure. And then after that, I would go. I mean, that's just one guy I would talk about. There's another guys. One guy I definitely think to keep an eye on is AJ Green. He's been one of the best receivers in the NFL for a while now. He's kind of slowed down, and I definitely think that's why people are going to give him a cheap deal. If we can get him for a cheap deal, that's going to be an absolute steal because I definitely think he can ball out here. Once Zach Taylor became the Bengals head coach, the Cincinnati offense kind of shifted away from him, more towards Tyler Boyd, more towards T. Higgins. Those guys, more towards the tight ends with Burrow. He loves targeting those tight ends and slot receivers. AJ Green didn't have much of a role, so we didn't really get to see that much of a sample size with him. So I definitely think AJ Green would be a phenomenal fit right there with the 49ers. Definitely helping out this veteran, just getting some veteran leadership for the young guys. And a guy, I mean, he's a star, so definitely another guy. A veteran guy who I definitely think can play in the slot is Danny Amendola. Again, kind of old, another veteran guy. I definitely think you can bring him here in a 1-year deal, see what happens. Another guy I want to talk about, I mean, I keep saying another guy, but there's a lot. Emmanuel Sanders, I would not be opposed to bringing him back. He would be a fantastic pick. Same with Mohamed Sanu. I know we want to do a lot more with him. We cut him because we couldn't really figure it out. It wasn't the right time, but I would not be surprised if we took another look at him. And then 3 other guys I just want to mention really quickly. Keelan Cole of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had a really underrated season, in my opinion. I think they're probably going to move on for him, focus more on Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark. But Keelan Cole would be another great fit for the 49ers, in my opinion. Kind of the cheap guy, kind of filling that Kendrick Bourne role. I definitely think that would help a lot. Tim Patrick of the Denver Broncos had a fantastic season. Be a good guy to bring back. I know he was on the 49ers practice squad a little while ago. I forget if it was the Shanahan era or a different era. Last guy I want to talk about, slot guy. If you want to talk about a slot guy, I'll talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, who's probably going to be too expensive for this team to sign, but another name to keep an eye on. But looking at all these guys are cheap. They can provide veteran leadership. They're versatile, and they're pretty damn good receivers. So, and as Bean says right here, you need some special teams guys. Keelan Cole is a great returner. I think it was a punt return or a kick return touchdown this season. So, that was pretty great. As for Hurd replacements, there hasn't been that many, so I think you're probably looking at a draft guy to just get that Hurd emergency pick, which is why I love Tamorian Terry even more for the 49ers. So I've talked a lot. What do you guys think about free agents for the 49ers to sign for wide receiver?
I mean, another guy, in my opinion, to keep an eye on is honestly Sammy Watkins. I mean, he's fast and he can play big. I mean, I'm 90% sure the Chiefs might re-sign to another cheap deal, or he's going to get signed somewhere else. But he's 27, 6'1", pretty fast. So I mean, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him as long as it's for the right price, because, like Jordan said, we're kind of in a bit of a cap crunch. So with a bit of these other guys, if we can get them for the right price, I'm all for it. But we have to overpay. We have to start asking questions like, are we sure we really want to pay this guy this much money?
For sure. I definitely think the cap crunch is going to – it's kind of going to determine how we're going to approach this wide receiver class, because if we had a lot more cap, I would not be opposed to signing a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster. But now that we do have a little bit more of a cap crunch, I think you're probably looking at a guy on the cheaper side like Keelan Cole. Or, I mean, Eric says right here, Travis Benjamin could be coming back. Maybe we don't need a Keelan Cole. Maybe you're looking at a guy who can play more of a pure wide receiver role like Danny Amendola. But honestly, I think with Travis Benjamin, I would not mind moving on from him. I think Richie James, I still believe in him for the special team role as a kick returner. Punt returner, not so much. But Richie James had a very underrated season. A lot of people put that under the radar. In my opinion, he's looking really good. I know he did something with the social media today. I didn't really pay much attention to that, but I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, Richie James, I would not mind having back as well. He's not a free agent, so we would have to cut him or trade him or do something like that. Jordan, you got any free agents you want to talk about for receiver?
I don't think that there's anybody really in the free agent market that's going to be like an impact receiver that the 49ers are going to shell out for. I know everybody talks about Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel is going to be way too expensive for the 49ers.
Yeah, I'm not. I think Curtis Samuel is kind of out of the question.
I see that name thrown out way too much. He's 25, and his current deal this past season, he made $1.6 million. Just you and I and Rohit, that's a lot of money, but compared to the production that he was putting out and the value that he possesses in the modern NFL, I wouldn't blame him one bit if he were to go to a team that may not be as good that could afford the cap space to pay him. A team I would watch for Samuel is somebody like the Jets that are going to be running a lot of the similar.
I was about to say that too.
Shanahan was doing. They have a tremendous amount of cap space. But in terms of the 49ers, the only player that I really see that I would see them maybe pursuing is Cordarrelle Patterson. Cordarrelle Patterson could be kind of that guy to do a lot of the same. You know, he's very similar to Jalen Hurd. I know last year a lot of people really like Laviska Shenault coming out of Colorado, ended up on the Jaguars, had a good rookie year. I like the comps of Shenault to Cordarrelle Patterson. Obviously, Patterson's a little bit older, but I think he gives them tremendous versatility. He can play in the slot. He can do a lot of that pre-snap motioning. He's a capable receiver, but he's also a solid returner, and he's somebody that would give the 49ers, even if he just was a punt and kick returner and everything else was secondary, it would be worth it to bring him in my opinion. I think that's one thing the 49ers have sorely lacked, unfortunately, is they had – I know I don't want to butcher the statistic off the top of my head, but I know they were at the bottom of the league or near the bottom in terms of EPA per play on return attempps. Like they were basically
it was never that good for the Niners.
It was very bad. Yeah, just watching games, you can see there was a lot of fair catches. There was a lot of there's a lot of fumbles and a lot of stuff, but they weren't really getting a net positive from their return game. So it'd be nice to see them get a guy that could turn that around. Dwayne Harris is another guy who used to have that role. He had that for a while for the Giants, for Dallas. Or if they get a guy that can just kind of be that return specialist that's going to come in and give them the ability to, just sort of focus on not fumbling the ball and getting them maybe 5, 7, 12 yards on these punt returns and getting them something like, for me, the one that still gets me is that game against Arizona. And I forget if it was Kraft or if it was Trent Taylor, when they fair caught the ball and there wasn't a defender on the screen. There wasn't a defender within 15 yards of them. Yeah,
it was Kraft.
Yeah, it wasn't a defender within 15 yards of them. And it just kind of was the perfect personification of the issues they've had there. In my opinion, the 49ers haven't had a plus returner since Ted Ginn. It's been quite a long time. So it'd be nice to see them address that. I don't see really a player, I would love Allen Robinson. They were in on Allen Robinson before he went to the Bears a couple years ago. But with Ayuk and there now, and especially with Kittle as in that pecking order, I don't see them having an offense that's built around, throwing the ball enough that you would justify the amount of money that Allen Robinson at 28 should be getting as the good receiver he is. The only other guy that I would, be interested to see what happens with is Corey Davis out of Tennessee, who was he was the first, he was a top 5 pick, drew a lot of comparisons to Antonio Brown, which is no fault of his own. I think it's unfair to put those kind of expectations on the guy. But this past season, he was graded very highly. His statistics may not pop out at you, but he was very efficient with the targets and the reps that he was getting. I would be interested to see how much money he's going to command a year, because if he does come in at something that's affordable, I think he would be a tremendous fit for the 49ers. He's a very good route runner. Does a lot of the things that Kyle Shanahan really likes. He's got good size, decent speed, and he's shown that he can be reliable in the right scheme. And Arthur Smith ran an offense that's very similar to what Kyle's running here, so he should have no issue really kind of coming in, absorbing the playbook, and finding a fit if they were to ever make that work. I don't know if it's going to happen, but those would be my two guys. I just don't really see anybody in free agency. I think they'd be way more likely to bring back a Kendrick Bourne than they would be to go pluck one of these guys out of free agency, because there are some guys at the top of the market that look really good. The 49ers just aren't in the market for a wide receiver 1 or even a 2 for that matter.
Yeah, we're really just looking for depth or wide receiver 3.
Depth, special teams, wide receiver 3, something like that. I think Kendrick Bourne's decision definitely has a massive role to play for it. And as for a guy, as Jaron says, T.Y. Hilton, I think that's a bit too expensive.
I think he's gonna command a high price tag. His consistency, his talent, it speaks for itself.
And he definitely, I know he was kind of inconsistent at the beginning of the year, kind of stepped up towards the end of the year. So I don't think we're really getting him. Jordan, you mentioned River Craycraft. That's one of the 3 free agents that we had. We talked about Kendrick Bourne. We think he's probably staying. He's definitely replaceable. Trent Taylor, I didn't even ask that. I think we got the consensus that he's leaving and we're not re-signing
he's gone.
him.
He's gone.
For sure. And then River Craycraft, I think that's an interesting name to watch because he did pretty well for us, if I'm being honest, despite all the injuries. In my opinion, I think you definitely keep him on this roster, a 1-year deal, and see what he does in training camp. That's what I'm probably thinking for River Craycraft. I don't know what the practice squad rules are going to be this year. Are they going to assign anyone to the practice squad? Are they just going to assign that old rules that they had with the practice squad? Or are they just going to put him on the roster, or are they going to cut him? I think that would probably be the best deal for River Craycraft. Just get him on the 90-man roster and play it from there. Absolutely.
There's still a lot of unknowns going into really getting into meat of the offseason. We still don't know. I don't think we're having a combine this year, are we?
There's no combine. It's just pro days.
Okay. So no combines, meaning we're not going to have all the scouts in the same area. So we're not going to have that type of massive inflated draft stocks. We're just going to have pro days, meaning we're still going to see player stocks go up and down. But we also the salary cap is still fluctuating. We don't know if it's going to be 175 million at the floor or maybe a bit higher, 180. We still don't know about how the practice squad rules are going to be. There's just so much. There's so many unknowns that it's hard to actually really think about what's actually going to happen. So and at this point, it's just a waiting game of seeing what goes down and when.
For sure. Quarterback definitely matters. I mean, what we do on the offensive line matters. How we spend our money matters. So all in all, I think we can definitely come to the consensus that the wide receiving game is kind of up for grabs this year with who we're bringing in, who we're keeping, what the need is going to be at wide receiver. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting offseason. Could be a wild ride at wide receiver. So, yeah. You guys got anything else on wide receiver, running back, anything before we want to end the stream?
No,
just, don't pay running backs. That's just ultimately what it comes down to. Don't expect the 49ers to
don't pay running backs.
Yeah, don't pay running backs. If anybody watching, if you have free time, go watch Rondale Moore videos, and I promise you'll fall in love with this man as a wide receiver prospect. This is just, he's an athlete at a level that I just had. One of my favorite receivers of all time is Steve Smith, who was on, everybody knows he was on Panthers for a while. He was on the Ravens for a bit at the end of his career. And I see so much of Steve Smith and Rondale Moore, but he also runs a 4.33. The guy is just there's just so many things to like about him, and it's so easy. The thing that I will say though is temper expectations for the draft. I think the 49ers are going to address either the offensive or defensive line with that 12th pick. Last year, I think we all kind of knew they were going to take a receiver in the first round, so it's kind of fun to speculate. I really like CeeDee Lamb. I liked Henry Ruggs. I liked Ayuk too. I expected them to take the receiver at 13 personally, but I think it ended up working out well. Don't expect that this year. I don't see the 49ers reaching for a receiver in the first couple rounds. So a lot of those guys kind of at the top, it's really fun to watch. You don't have to just be 49ers fans. I'm a fan of the sport in general. I like watching these guys regardless, but just don't get your hopes up that the Niners are going to take any of these guys very early on. Again, I would watch the guys towards the back end. Sage Surratt, Tylan Wallace, Daz Newsome, Dwayne Eskridge is another guy to watch. He had a really good Senior Bowl. Tutu Atwell. I know Zach Greer. I don't know, Zach Greer out there, if you guys go on Twitter, he really likes Marquez Stevenson. That's his guy out of Houston. So he's another guy to watch, maybe where they can add that kind of speed threat. But I just don't really see them, as much as I would love to see it, I don't see them really investing that kind of capital into another receiver at this point based on the offense that they're trying to run. So just kind of, I would just advise everybody to kind of temper your expectations in regards. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't take a receiver at all. Like I think they will, but it wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Like last year, if you told me they didn't take a receiver, I would be dumbfounded. But I think that they're more okay than their depth chart may signify at that position.
For sure. And I mean, free agency is going to play a massive role in how they address the draft. But yeah, man, I mean, you said it better. I mean, with running backs, just don't pay running backs. Receiver, it's going to be a very interesting game to see how we do at receivers. So, and I second the Rondale Moore thing. Go watch Rondale Moore tape. Very fun to watch. So hope we get him. We'll have to see what happens. And for that 12th pick, offensive line, defensive line, quarterback, it's probably going to be one of those, not cornerback, not wide receivers. So, and Lynch likes to build in the trenches. We need a quarterback. Get those needs early. Speaking of trenches, offensive line video for the series will be next week. Might bring you guys back, might bring some other guests back, but we'll have to see it. As for you guys, thank you guys so much for coming on today. I really appreciate giving your analysis. Always happy to have you on the channel, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, for sure. But guys, for the viewers, that's going to do it for the stream. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you want to follow up with me, make sure to comment below. Follow these accounts on Twitter. Subscribe to NinerWire on YouTube if you're there. Also follow these guys on Twitter at Rohit Kannan71, at @splash_cousin. They post a lot of stuff there. Make sure to check them out. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for watching it, and I will see you guys next time. Go Niners!